I wasn't expecting anyone that Saturday morning. The sun had just started warming the front steps of my Queen Anne home, and I was sipping my first coffee in pajamas when the doorbell rang once, then twice, then again. I opened the door and froze. In front of me stood my parents, my younger brother Dylan, his pregnant wife Lana, and behind them, a full-sized moving truck parked against the curb. A delivery crew was already unloading boxes. One of them smiled politely and said, "We're here to help with the move." My move. What move? I asked, my voice already tightening. Lana rubbed her belly with both hands and stepped forward, her smile sweet but calculated. "We figured this was the best time to get you packed before the baby comes." My father nodded. "We've already signed the lease on a beautiful studio apartment for you. It's closer to your office, very efficient for a single woman." It took me a full 5 seconds to process what I was hearing. They weren't here to visit. They weren't asking for help. They had decided without asking me that I should vacate my own home, so Dylan and Lana could move in and raise their child here. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd I thought I might be hallucinating. "Wait, you're serious?" My mother placed a box on my doorstep. "Honey, it just makes sense. This house is too big for one person." No one asked if I was okay with it. No one asked if I was even willing to consider it. They came with a moving crease if my consent was a formality they could skip. And in that moment, something snapped inside me. This wasn't just about a house. It was about control. It was about being erased from my own life. If you've ever had your boundaries trampled by the people who were supposed to love you most, drop a comment below. I promise you are not alone. Because what happened next would shake every part of who I thought I was and who I was finally becoming. They've always seen Dylan as the center of our family's universe. It wasn't something they ever said aloud, but you could feel it in every word, every glance, every decision. I was the firstborn, quiet, driven, independent. But Dylan? Dylan was the golden son. I was 7 when he was born, and from the moment my mother held him, something shifted. The attention that used to come my way evaporated overnight. Suddenly, every conversation started with, "Your brother needs," or "Let's not disturb Dylan." When I got straight A's in middle school, my mom glanced up from her phone and said, "That's great, sweetie." When Dylan remembered to bring home a permission slip, there were high fives and ice cream. At first, I tried harder. I thought maybe if I accomplished more, they'd see me again. So I did. I got into the advanced placement program. I made captain of the debate team. I was offered a scholarship to a leadership summer camp in high school, but my parents said we couldn't afford it. 3 months later, they bought Dylan a brand new gaming PC for his birthday. I learned early on not to ask for too much. Dylan, on the other hand, never had to ask. If he hinted at something, it appeared. If he messed up, there were excuses waiting on his behalf. He's just figuring things out. He's more sensitive. You've always been the strong one, Mads. That last one? That one stuck to my ribs like glue. You've always been the strong one. What that really meant was, you don't get to ask for anything. You don't get to break. You don't get to need. By the time I went to college, I had a part-time job, a scholarship, and a load of student loans. Dylan got a full ride from my parents to attend a private university in California, despite switching majors twice and graduating a year late. They flew out for his graduation. Mine was watched over Zoom because flights were expensive that time of year. I kept my hurt quiet. I always had. It was easier to let them believe I was fine than to face the awkward silence that came every time I tried to express myself. After college, I moved to Seattle and started over. Slowly, carefully. I built my career from internships and late-night freelancing gigs. I budgeted every dollar. I said no to vacations, to dining out, to anything that could delay the one thing I had dreamed of for years. A home that was mine, bought by me without needing anyone's permission. So when I signed the mortgage for my Queen Anne house, when I stood alone in the echo of the empty living room and felt tears sting my eyes, it wasn't just a victory. It was a quiet, personal revolution. But the thing about golden children is they're not used to hearing no. And the people who raise them? They don't take no very well either. When I first moved to Seattle, I lived in a 400 square foot studio above a Thai takeout place. The rent was barely manageable, the walls were paper thin, and the plumbing groaned like it resented every drop of water. But it was minier, at least. It was the first place I paid for completely on my own. That little box of a home became my training ground for adulthood. I learned how to stretch a $50 grocery budget into a week's worth of meals. I learned how to scrub mildew from tile grout. I learned that loneliness hits hardest at 2 a.m. when you're surrounded by silence and concrete. But I also learned discipline. I tracked every expense. I put 20% of every paycheck into savings, no matter how small it was. While my peers splurged on brunch and new tech, I kept a spreadsheet of projected expenses, earnings, and a savings goal I looked at every night before bed. Down payment by age 30. I wasn't just saving for a house. I was saving for autonomy, for dignity, for a space where no one could tell me what I should be doing or who I should be giving it up for. I climbed the ladder at work one rung at a time. Started as a junior copywriter, then senior, then team lead. I said yes to overtime, to last-minute presentations, to projects no one else wanted. I had to be twice as prepared, twice as polished. There was no one coming to save me if I failed. By the time I turned 31, I had saved enough for a modest down payment. But instead of rushing into the first available option, I waited. Watched the listings, ran the numbers again and again. I must have visited 20 houses before I found her. A weathered, 3-story Victorian perched on the slope of Queen Anne Hill. She was a little bruised around the edges, peeling paint, dated interiors, but the bones were strong, and the moment I stepped inside, I knew. High ceilings. Original hardwood. Stained glass windows that caught the morning light like a prism. This house didn't just have character. It had potential. I made the offer the next day. 3 weeks later, I held the keys in my palm and walked into my home for the first time. I stood in the middle of the empty living room, took a deep breath, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: safety. Not just physical safety, but emotional safety. This was mine, not loaned, not borrowed, not inherited. Mine. Over the next 2 years, I poured everything I had into restoring it, nights and weekends covered in paint and dust, YouTube tutorials on historic molding, furniture slowly bought one piece at a time. Every room became a reflection of me. The cozy reading nook under the staircase. The blue-painted office where I built my next career leap. The guest room no one ever stayed in, but I still kept ready just in case someone came who truly saw me. This house became more than a place to sleep. It became proof. Proof that I was capable. Proof that I mattered even if no one clapped when I arrived. And now they want to take it. But I didn't fight all those years just to hand it over. Not without a fight. I should have known something was up the moment I got that text. Family dinner this Sunday at 6. Lana's cooking, don't be late. From my mother. No emojis, no explanation, just that. We weren't the kind of family that did regular dinners. Holidays, sure, Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, the occasional 4th of July barbecue. But random Sunday dinners? That wasn't our thing, especially not at Lana's request. Still, I showed up. With a bottle of wine and cautious optimism. Dylan and Lana's condo downtown was exactly what you'd expect from a lifestyle influencer's nest. All beige tones, brass fixtures, curated casual clutter, and ring lights tucked discreetly into corners. Even their dog looked like it was part of a brand campaign. Lana opened the door with that bright, camera-ready smile. "Maddie, you look so good. Is that jacket vintage?" It wasn't. But I thanked her anyway. Dinner was already plated when I walked in: salmon with microgreens, 3 different dipping sauces in tiny ramekins. My parents were seated at the table, sipping white wine like they were trying to act normal. They weren't good at that. We made small talk through the salad. Lana talked about a new sponsorship deal with an organic skincare brand. My dad tried to remember how many followers she had now. 6,000, he guessed. Lana laughed. Closer to 65,000. My mother beamed like Lana had just won the Pulitzer. Then, just as I picked up my fork for the main course, Lana put her hand over Dylan's. They exchanged a look. And then she announced it. "We're pregnant." The room exploded into cheers. My mom gasped. My dad actually stood up to hug Dylan. My mom hugged Lana, then cried. She cried. They brought out sparkling cider and toasted. My dad made a whole speech about the first grandchild, how blessed they were, how proud he was to see the next generation starting. I raised my glass like everyone else. Smiled. Said congratulations. Tried to be in the moment. But inside, I was sinking. 2 weeks earlier, I had been nominated for a West Coast Creative Directors Award, one of the biggest honors in our industry. I'd mentioned it to my parents. They said, "Oh wow, that's great," and changed the subject. But this pregnancy? This was newsworthy. This was worthy of toasts and tears and applause. It hit me harder than I expected. Not because I wasn't happy for them. Dylan and Lana having a baby was fine, good, even. But the way my parents lit up. It was a reminder I hadn't asked for. A reminder that in their eyes, success didn't mean career milestones. It meant milestones they could show off at church. A husband. A baby. Something photo-worthy. Something to pass around the family group chat. I was 33, single, child-free by choice, and thriving. But none of that seemed to count. I was a footnote at my own family dinner. And what I didn't know, what none of them said out loud that night, was that this baby announcement was only the beginning. The first domino in a plan I hadn't agreed to. A plan that had already been whispered about behind my back. And it all started with a toast I was never truly part of. The first hint came exactly 5 days after the pregnancy dinner. My dad called me on a Thursday night, which in itself was already strange. He usually only called on birthdays, or when my mom made him. We made brief small talk. How's work? How's the weather? How's that little house project of yours, before he slid it in. Hey, remind me again. How many bedrooms does your place have? I paused. 3. Why? He chuckled, like it was no big deal. Just thinking how lucky you are. That's a lot of space for one person. I said nothing. Because I knew that tone. It was the same tone he used when he was about to tell me I didn't really need that thing I worked hard for. The same tone he used when he told me I was too independent for my own good. I let the comment go, but I felt the tension coil. Then the next one came, this time from Lana. She stopped by just to drop off some homemade muffins one morning, which, to be clear, she has never done before. I let her in because I didn't want to be rude, and because part of me was still clinging to the idea that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't what it looked like. She wandered through the living room like she was house hunting, commenting on the natural light, the high ceilings, the potential of the guest room. And then she said it. "You know, this place would be perfect for raising a baby." I smiled tightly. It was designed for grown adults, but sure. She laughed, but it wasn't playful. It was the kind of laugh that says, "You'll come around." That weekend, my mom called. Just to chat. But, after 10 minutes of updates I didn't ask for, she sighed deeply and said, "I just keep thinking, your guest room is going unused. Your office barely gets any sunlight, and you're always so busy with work. Sometimes I wonder if that big house is a bit too much for you, sweetheart." I looked down at my planner, packed with meetings and deadlines and notes. I'd just pulled a 70-hour work week. I had built an entire life that functioned because of that space. But my mom didn't see that. She saw rooms without cribs. She saw absence where I saw stability. She saw my boundaries and started drawing blueprints around them. They all acted like they were being helpful. Like this was just logic. Just family working things out. But let's be honest. If I were a man, a successful, single man with a 3-bedroom house, none of these conversations would be happening. No one would be calling him to ask about his guest room. No one would be suggesting he downgrade to a studio so someone else could nest. That's the hypocrisy. It wasn't really about space. It was about usefulness. To them, my success only mattered if it could be redirected, if it could become convenient. They hadn't even asked. They just assumed. Assumed that because I had the space, I'd offer it. Assumed that because I was single, I had less claim to it. Assumed that because I'd always kept the peace, I'd just surrender. But the thing is, the longer you stay quiet, the more entitled people feel to your silence. And I was starting to feel a shift. A quiet but growing no building at the back of my throat. I just didn't know how loud it would have to become. It wasn't subtle anymore. The hints had turned into suggestions. And the suggestions were becoming expectations. The phone call came on a Monday night, just after I'd finished eating dinner. My dad's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't pick up. But I did. He skipped the small talk this time. "Madeline," he said, "your mother and I have been thinking about how we can help Dylan and Lana get through this transition." I stayed silent. You know, with the baby on the way and Lana's job going more part-time, they're a little strapped. And Dylan's still working out that new contract with the consulting firm. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Here it comes. So, we've been looking into some options. There's a really nice studio apartment closer to your office. It's got great reviews, walking distance to everything, lots of sunlight. We think it could be perfect for you. I blinked. Wait. For me? He sounded surprised that I needed clarification. Yeah. It makes sense, right? You're working all the time anyway. You barely use half your house, and your office there is just a guest room with a desk, isn't it? I put my fork down. I work from home 3 days a week. That space isn't optional. There was a pause. Then, more gently. But think about how much easier it would be for Dylan and Lana to settle in. That house is perfect for a young family. And you'd still have your independence. The studio's furnished. First month's rent already covered. That last part? That stopped me cold. You already paid for it? I asked. We put down a deposit, he replied quickly. Nothing binding, just holding it. You don't even have to move until after they settle in. We'll help you pack. Make it smooth. I sat there staring into my cold dinner, trying to steady my breath. They weren't asking. They had made a plan. And I was expected to comply. The next day, my mom followed up with a voicemail. Her tone was upbeat, but I could hear the edge underneath. "Maddie, sweetie, I saw some photos of the new place we found. You're going to love it. It's perfect for someone like you, no clutter, very modern. I'll send the link later." Someone like me. I didn't even know what that meant anymore. Single? Successful? Inconvenient? And then came the worst part, Lana. She stopped by again that week, this time with swatches of nursery wallpaper. She laid them out on my dining room table like it was already hers. "We're thinking this one for the guest room," she said, pointing at a cream and gold design with tiny giraffes. "But if you're not set on keeping the blue in the master, I have a different palette in mind. Dylan says the lighting in there is just perfect for newborns." I stared at her. "You're planning the nursery in my bedroom." She blinked, as if surprised by the tone in my voice. Well, where else would we put it? And there it was. Not just the suggestion that I should give up my space, but the assumption that I already had. It wasn't even a request. It was logistics. My life prepackaged, rescheduled, reassigned. They had reimagined my home without me. And I was expected to step out quietly, gracefully, gratefully. But something in me, something deep and long buried, started to rise. The version of me that had paid every mortgage bill, painted every wall, earned every square foot of this home. And that version? She wasn't going anywhere. It was a quiet Saturday morning. I had just finished watering the plants on my balcony and was halfway through folding laundry when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. No packages, no visitors, no appointments. When I opened the door, I found 2 delivery men standing on my porch beside a large, sealed box. One of them held a clipboard. "Delivery for Anderson," he said. "Crib and changing table, assembly requested." He blinked. "Excuse me?" He glanced at the paperwork. 147 North Elm, right? Madeline Carter? I nodded slowly. Yep. Delivered to this address. Purchaser's name is Lana Anderson. My stomach dropped. I looked at the massive box. A baby brand printed across the side. White, clean, cheerful. A label taped across the top read, "Delivered to side door, set up in room with bay windows." I felt the heat rise in my chest. "This wasn't authorized," I said. "I didn't order this. No one living here did." The delivery guys exchanged a glance. "Do you want us to take it back?" "Yes, please." My voice shook. "Take it back." I watched them wheel the box down the steps and load it back into the truck. Then I walked straight to my kitchen table, sat down, and called the number listed on the receipt. After 15 minutes of transfers and hold music, a rep finally answered. Yes, the order had been placed by Lana Anderson. Yes, the delivery instructions were to my home. Yes, it was paid in full. 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. Before they'd even hinted at maybe staying with me. Before the muffins. Before the studio apartment suggestion. I hung up the phone and sat there in complete silence, hands trembling, eyes unfocused. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a hopeful gesture. It was a tactic. A push. A trap. Set up the nursery. Let the furniture arrive. Make it physical real. Because who would send baby furniture back once it was in the room? Who would say no to a crying pregnant woman standing next to a crib? They were counting on my discomfort, on my empathy, on my silence. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't just about space anymore. It was about entitlement. About how deeply they believed my life should rearrange around theirs. If you've ever felt someone quietly rewriting the rules of your own life without asking, without apology, leave a comment below. I want to hear your story. Because what they tried to do next still stuns me to this day. I texted Lana immediately. "Did you order baby furniture to be delivered to my house?" No response. An hour later, a message from my mom. "We're stopping by around noon. There's something we need to talk about." No context. No explanation. Just a heads up like I should be ready for something. And somewhere deep in my gut, I already knew. This wasn't a conversation. This was a move-in. And I wasn't the one calling the shots. By noon, I was pacing. I'd opened every curtain, turned off the stove, and made 3 circuits around the house, like I was preparing for a storm I couldn't see but could feel in my bones. Then I heard it. Engines. Doors slamming. Footsteps on the gravel. I peeked through the front window, and my heart dropped. There it was. A full-size moving truck in my driveway. And behind it, Dylan's SUV. And stepping out of the passenger side, Lana, cradling her baby bump with one hand and a Pinterest-looking folder in the other. My mother emerged from the moving truck first, smiling. Like this was Christmas morning. My father came next, tugging at a dolly stacked with flattened boxes. I opened the front door, already shaking. "What is this?" My mom walked up the steps like she lived there. "Surprise, we're here to help you move." I blinked. "I'm sorry, move who?" My dad joined her at the top of the porch. "You, sweetheart, will get everything boxed up today. The studio's already set." He said it like we'd all agreed. Like this was the plan. Like I was late for my own moving day. I stepped back, blocking the doorway. "You can't be serious." "Of course we are," my mother said cheerfully. "You'll love the new place. And this house, it's perfect for a growing family. It just makes sense." Lana smiled sweetly, still on the walkway. "I've already got some ideas for the nursery. The guest room gets great morning light." I could feel my jaw clench. My bedroom. My office. My home. They were talking about it like it was a real estate listing they were repurposing. "You all need to stop," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I never agreed to this." You can't just show up with a truck and start moving me out. My father didn't even flinch. We're trying to help you. You work too hard. You'll be happier in a smaller space. No distractions. And just like that, my entire life was reduced to an overreaction. My career, my autonomy, my mortgage all simplified into too much space. Behind them, one of the movers opened the back of the truck. A stack of folded wardrobe boxes, bubble wrap, packing tape. My mother brushed past me, walking straight into my foyer like she belonged there. She glanced around and clapped her hands together. Okay, let's start in the kitchen. That's the least sentimental. I turned and followed her. Mom, you need to leave. She opened a cabinet and started pulling plates down. Honey, don't be dramatic. We'll have you packed by dinner time. I looked toward the living room and saw my dad assembling a box. One of my framed photos already wrapped in paper. This was really happening. They were moving me out without my consent, without my signature, without my voice. And as Lana stepped across the threshold, flipping open that Pinterest folder with nursery color palettes and quotes like, "Bless this mess," I realized something chilling. They didn't see this as a violation. They saw it as entitlement. As their right. As inevitable. And suddenly, I understood what I was dealing with. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a takeover. I didn't remember walking back into the kitchen. One minute, my mom was wrapping plates like it was her job, my dad was boxing up books in the living room, and Lana was sketching out a nursery in my guest room. The next, I was gripping the edge of the kitchen counter, breathing through clenched teeth, staring at the fridge like it had answers. They weren't going to stop. I'd said no clearly, directly, more than once. And they didn't care. They weren't listening because they had already made up their minds. This house was theirs now. I was the one in the way. I walked back into the living room and found my dad halfway through taping up a box of my framed photos. Put that down. He didn't look up. Sweetheart, I'm being careful. Don't worry, everything will be labeled. I moved between him and the door. I'm not moving. He finally looked at me, sighing like I was being childish. This isn't about you, Maddie. It's about what's best for everyone. You mean everyone except me. He set the tape gun down. You're overreacting. I took a breath. I'm not overreacting. You are in my house, touching my things, planning a future here that I never agreed to. That's not family, that's trespassing. He blinked. It was the first time I saw any real hesitation in his face. From upstairs, I heard drawers opening. My mother had moved on to my bedroom. I ran up the stairs, 2 at a time. She was in my closet, folding clothes, sorting them into piles. Some labeled with sticky notes. Keep. Storage. Donate. Mom, I said, my voice sharp. Get out of my room. She didn't even flinch. We're trying to help you, Madeline. Don't be so ungrateful. I stared at her, stunned. She was folding my shirts, planning my exit. Like I didn't even exist as a person, just a placeholder to be shifted out of frame. I'm not asking anymore, I said. You need to leave, all of you. Vet. She clicked her tongue and kept folding. You're being so dramatic. This is why you're always alone. That one landed like a slap. And maybe that was the point. Downstairs, I heard movement again. Boxes being loaded. Doors opening. I couldn't breathe. They were steamrolling me in real time. Every no I said was ignored. Every word I tried to speak was painted over by what's best for the family. I didn't matter. Not to them. Not here. Not in the home I built. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was theft. And they weren't going to stop until someone made them. I walked into the kitchen, picked up my phone, and opened the dial pad. 911. My finger hovered for half a second. Then I pressed call. The house was silent. The kind of silence that only comes after something breaks. After the officers left my family packed their disappointment into their vehicles and drove away without a single glance back. I stood in the middle of my living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes and broken trust. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a funeral. I spent the rest of that day putting things back where they belonged. The framed photos, the books, the plates my mother had so lovingly wrapped like she was doing me a favor. Each item I touched felt heavier than it had before. I changed the locks that night. A locksmith came within the hour. No questions asked. Apparently, I need them out for good is explanation enough in this city. The next morning, I made coffee and opened my phone only to find that everything had blown up. I had dozens of texts, missed calls, and DMs. Aunt Cheryl. Cousin Ben. My old piano teacher. Even people I hadn't spoken to in years. Most of the messages had the same tone. Is it true? Why would you do that to your family? Calling the police? On your pregnant sister? I didn't understand until I opened Instagram. There it was. A post from Lana. A perfectly filtered selfie. Her hand on her belly, her face turned slightly to the side like a Renaissance portrait of grief. And the caption. When the people you love most choose property over family. When your unborn child is treated like an inconvenience. Sometimes, all you can do is pray. Number family first. Number. Heartbroken number. What about the baby? There was no mention of the moving truck. No mention of the unsolicited furniture delivery. No mention of the fact that I had asked them to leave over and over again. Just curated heartbreak. Wrapped in soft lighting and hashtags. And the comments. Hundreds of them. How could anyone be so heartless? Family always comes first. You and your baby deserve better. Some people had even tracked me down. Messaging me. Tagging me. Calling me selfish. Cold. A monster. I sat there, phone in hand, trying to make sense of it all. They weren't just rewriting the story. They were broadcasting it. And I was being cast as the villain without a script, without a defense, without a platform. I could have responded. I could have posted screenshots, told the whole story, but I didn't. Because somewhere deep down, I knew something they didn't. I didn't owe anyone a version of myself they could tolerate. I didn't need to defend my right to exist in peace in my own home. But that didn't make it easier. It hurt. It burned. And yet, underneath all of that pain was something else, something sharper, more focused. Resolve. They could take their story to the internet. I was taking mine back to reality. And I wasn't finished. I kept my phone off for 3 full days. Not on silent, not on do not disturb. You stuff. Because sometimes, when the whole world is shouting at you, the most radical thing you can do is choose silence. I needed space. Not just physical space, but emotional room to grieve. To breathe. To ask myself the question that had haunted me since the truck pulled into my driveway. Why did they think this was okay? And slowly, another question emerged beneath it. Why did I think I had to endure it? The answer came, in part, through therapy. I started seeing Dr. Halvorsen, a quiet woman with soft sweaters and sharper insights than I was ready for. In our first session, I told her everything. The moving truck. The social media post. The silence that followed. She didn't interrupt. She didn't flinch. When I finished, she simply said, "What they did wasn't love. It was entitlement disguised as obligation. And you're allowed to protect yourself from that." I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone to say it out loud. Around the same time, my best friend Jordan showed up on my doorstep with Thai food and a bottle of wine. They didn't ask if I wanted company. They just came. And when I opened the door, they didn't say, "I'm sorry," or "That's insane," or "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" They said, "I brought spring rolls and spicy noodles. You need both." We ate on the floor, surrounded by half-packed boxes and tension that still clung to the walls. Later that week, my coworker Mia dropped off a bag of groceries and a handwritten note. Your peace is worth protecting. Let me know if you need help building the moat. And 3. And just like that, something started to shift. Little by little, I remembered what it felt like to be seen. Not as someone's backup plan. Not as a resource to be reallocated. But as a person. A whole, complicated, worthy person. My house, my sanctuary started to feel like mine again. I rearranged the furniture. Not because it was necessary, but because it felt symbolic. A reset. I filled the guest room with books and blankets and zero expectations. I painted the nursery, that never was a deep forest green, hung up a print that said, "Rest is not a reward." And then I started hosting Sunday dinners. Not for my family of origin, but for my chosen family. The ones who brought food when I didn't ask. The ones who sat quietly when I needed space. The ones who didn't question why I said no, only asked how they could help me say it louder. We sat around my dining room table laughing, venting, pouring wine and stories, and for the first time in weeks, I felt warmth return to the walls. Not from the radiator. From the people. From the truth. Because rebuilding doesn't always mean starting over. Sometimes, it means reclaiming what was already your sand, finally giving it the care it always deserved. 3 months passed before I heard from Dylan. No calls, no texts. Just a name I hadn't seen on my phone since the day the police stood in my doorway, arms crossed, making sure my family left with their boxies and their assumptions in tow. The message was short. Lana had the baby yesterday. A girl. Her name is Ivy. I just thought you should know. Also, I'm sorry for everything. That was it. No photos, no guilt, just information. And a crack in the wall that had been solid for months. I read it once. Then again. Then again. The truth is, I didn't know what I felt. Anger? Grief? Some flicker of curiosity I didn't want to admit out loud? I let the message sit for 2 days before replying. Thank you for letting me know. I hope Lana and Ivy are healthy. I'm still figuring things out, but I appreciate the message. That was all I could give. And surprisingly, it felt like enough. A few weeks later, Dylan asked if I might want to meet Ivy. He offered to bring her to a park near my house. Neutral territory. No Lana. No drama. Just a quiet moment. I said yes. The day was overcast when we met. Ivy was tiny, wrapped in a floral blanket, her eyes barely open as she lay nestled in her dad's arms. When he handed her to me, my breath caught. She was warm and soft and new. And somehow, holding her didn't break my boundaries. It reminded me why I built them. Because one day, she'll grow up. And she'll watch how people are treated. She'll watch what love looks like. And I hope, truly I hope she sees that love is not control. That boundaries are not rejection. That strength isn't cruelty. Dylan sat beside me on the bench. He didn't say much. But as I handed Ivy back to him, he looked up and said quietly, "You were right to stop it. I should have said something sooner." I nodded. "You still can." And maybe he will. Maybe not. But that day wasn't about fixing anyone else. It was about choosing not to abandon myself anymore. I went home after that and walked through the front door of my house, the same one they tried to take from me. But it didn't feel like a battleground anymore. It felt like mine again. Not just because I'd kept it, but because I'd become the version of me who knew how to. The version who didn't flinch at guilt trips. Who could hold a baby and still hold a boundary. Who didn't need to be understood to stand firm. That's the thing about becoming. It doesn't come from pleasing others. It comes from protecting the parts of yourself they once tried to edit out. If you've ever had to choose peace over approval, if you've ever drawn a boundary and watched the world call it betrayal, know this. You're not alone. Leave a comment, share your story. Because someone else out there might need the courage that only your voice can offer.